August 15th, 1940. 1,200 feet above the Kent coastline, Hauptmann Horst Tietzen banked his Messerschmitt Bf 109 E3 into a lazy turn, scanning the sky below for the RAF fighters his intelligence reports promised would be obsolete, easy prey. Through his canopy, he spotted them climbing to intercept. A dozen Hawker Hurricanes, their thick wings and bulky fuselages making them look like relics from a previous war. He keyed his radio. "Here come the flying haystacks," he transmitted to his wingman, unable to suppress his amusement. "These British are still flying museum pieces." The veteran of the Spanish Civil War and the French campaign had faced the best fighters Europe could offer. He duelled with Soviet I-16s over Madrid, tangled with French Moransolnia 406, and Curtiss Hawks over the Maginot Line. Every encounter had reinforced his confidence in German superiority. The Messerschmitt 109 was faster, climbed better, and dove like a meteor. The Hurricane, with its fabric-covered fuselage and fixed-pitch propeller on early models, looked like something his father might have flown in the previous war. What Tietzen didn't know, what none of the Luftwaffe pilots circling over England that summer understood, was that they were about to collide with a machine designed not for elegance or speed, but for a single brutal purpose: to destroy bombers while absorbing punishment that would shred more sophisticated fighters. The Hurricane wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but in the desperate summer of 1940, it would account for more German aircraft destroyed than all other British defences combined. This is the story of how German mockery turned to grudging respect, and finally to fear, as the ungainly British fighter rewrote the rules of defensive air warfare and saved a nation standing alone against Nazi conquest. The Hawker Hurricane emerged from a 1933 Air Ministry specification that nobody initially took seriously. Britain's air defence establishment remained enamoured with biplanes, elegant machines that had dominated the skies since 1914. The idea that aircraft would need to fly faster than 300 miles per hour seemed fanciful. That they would need 8 machine guns instead of 2 seemed excessive. Sidney Cam, Hawker's chief designer, disagreed with everything the Air Ministry believed. A working-class engineer from Windsor who'd started as a carpenter's apprentice, Cam understood something the aristocratic RAF commanders didn't. The next war would be won by the side that could build large numbers of effective fighters quickly, not by the side with the most refined aircraft. His design philosophy reflected brutal pragmatism. The Hurricane used the same basic construction methods as Hawker's previous biplane fighters: a metal tube framework covered largely with doped fabric, massive Warren girder wing spars that a tank could drive over, components designed to be built by furniture makers and car mechanics, not specialised aircraft workers. When the prototype first flew on November 6, 1935, with test pilot Flight Lieutenant P.W.S. Bullman at the controls, it immediately demonstrated 2 characteristics that would define its combat career. It was stable, rock steady as a gun platform, and it was tough, absurdly overbuilt in an era of increasingly lightweight construction. The Air Ministry placed an order for 600 aircraft in June 1936, the largest fighter contract in British history. Production began immediately at Hawker's Kingston facility and at the new shadow factories being built across Britain. The manufacturing process was deliberately simple. The fuselage required no complex jigs or dies. 4 tubular steel longerons connected by cross-bracing formed the backbone. Wooden formers gave it shape. Irish linen fabric, doped and painted, provided the covering. A skilled team could build a fuselage in a week using tools found in any metal shop. The wing was an entirely different matter. Cam had designed it with one purpose: to mount 8 Browning 303 machine guns with 2,060 rounds of ammunition, while remaining strong enough for violent combat manoeuvres. Each wing used a massive I-beam main spar running from root to tip, supplemented by a rear spar and ribs every 9 inches. The structure was so strong that damaged Hurricanes regularly returned, with entire sections of wing missing, the remaining structure carrying loads that would have torn apart lighter designs. When the first production Hurricanes reached RAF squadrons in December 1937, pilots had mixed reactions. Squadron Leader J.W. Gillen of 111 Squadron, one of the first units to receive the new fighter, summarised the prevailing opinion. "It's not a thoroughbred like the Spitfire, it's a cart horse, but by God, it's a willing cart horse." The Hurricane's combat debut came on October 21, 1939, when Flying Officer Peter Mould of the Squadron shot down a Dornier de 17 over France. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. Mould closed to 200 yards and fired a 2-second burst from all 8 guns. The Dornier's port engine exploded, the wing folded, and the bomber fell out of formation in flames. The gun camera footage, analysed by RAF tacticians, revealed the devastating effect of concentrated machine gun fire. At convergence range, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone roughly 10 feet in diameter. A 2-second burst put 160 rounds into that zone. The German crew had no chance. As the phony war dragged through winter, German pilots encountered hurricanes regularly over the French border. Their initial assessments, filed with Luftwaffe intelligence, dripped with condescension. Oberleutnant Werner Milders, already an ace from Spain, and destined to become one of Germany's highest-scoring pilots, wrote in his combat diary after an engagement in November 1939, engaged 6 Hawker fighters over Metz. They manoeuvred like transport aircraft, slow and heavy. My wingman and I destroyed 2 without difficulty, the British. Fighter is inferior in every measurable performance category. It cannot catch our bombers, cannot evade our fighters, and presents no serious threat to Luftwaffe operations. Milders was technically correct. The Hurricane Mark I, with its Rolls-Royce Merlin II engine producing 1,030 horsepower, had a maximum speed of 318 miles per hour at 16 to 500 feet. The Messerschmitt Bf 109E could reach 354 miles per hour at 12,500 feet. In a climb, the German fighter reached 20,000 feet in 7.5 minutes. The Hurricane took 9.5 minutes. Rate of roll favoured the 109. Dive performance overwhelmingly favoured the 109. In traditional fighter combat, one-on-one dogfighting between roughly equal pilots, the Messerschmitt held every advantage. But the Hurricane hadn't been designed for duelling. It had been designed for bomber destruction, and in that role, every apparent weakness became a hidden strength. The thick wings housed not just 8 guns, but also the fuel tanks, ammunition boxes, retractable landing gear, and all the associated systems, creating a compact damage-resistant package. The fabric-covered fuselage meant that cannon shells and bullets often passed completely through without exploding, the fabric self-sealing around small holes. The wide-track landing gear made it extraordinarily stable on rough or damaged airfields. Most importantly, the gun platform was steady. Pilots could open fire at 400 yards and hold their aim while walking their fire into the target. The Messerschmitt, lighter and more manoeuvrable, twitched under recoil. The Hurricane didn't flinch. The true test came in May 1940 when Germany launched Full Gelb, the invasion of France and the Low Countries. The RAF had 261 Hurricanes in France, organised into 10 squadrons of the air component and advanced air striking force. They faced approximately 200 Luftwaffe fighters and 1,500 bombers. The mathematics were impossible. On May 10th, the first day of the offensive, every available Hurricane was in the air by dawn. Flight Lieutenant Richard Lee of 85 Squadron encountered a formation of Heinkel, who won 11 bombers near Maastricht at 8,000 feet. His combat report, filed that evening, described the engagement. Attacked from astern and below, closing to 150 yards before opening fire. Concentrated on the port engine and wing route. Observed strikes, then massive explosion. Port wing separated and the aircraft fell burning. Entire engagement lasted perhaps 5 seconds. The 8-gun battery is devastatingly effective against bomber-type aircraft. The Heinkels tried to scatter, but Lee's squadron destroyed 7 of them in less than 3 minutes. One Hurricane was damaged by return fire, but flew home. The pattern repeated across the front. Hurricanes couldn't catch 109s in a stern chase, couldn't outclimb them, couldn't escape if bounced from above. But when they reached the bomber formations, they became instruments of annihilation. The problem was numbers. For every German bomber destroyed, the Luftwaffe had 10 more. For every Hurricane lost, the RAF had maybe 2 replacements. The mathematics of attrition were brutal and one-sided. Squadron leader James Leithart of 54 Squadron, flying from Lille-Seclin, described the impossible situation in a letter written on May 15th. We fly 4, sometimes 5 sorties per day. Every patrol encounters enemy aircraft. We're destroying them at a tremendous rate, but there are always more. Yesterday we shot down 14 confirmed, probably destroyed another 6. Today we lost 4 pilots and 5 aircraft. The replacement pilots arrive with perhaps 20 hours on type. They last about 2 days. The Hurricanes are performing magnificently, but were being overwhelmed. By May 20th, RAF Fighter Command had lost 120 Hurricanes in France. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, commanding Fighter Command, faced an excruciating decision: continue reinforcing France and risk losing the entire fighter force, or preserve his strength for the inevitable battle over Britain. He chose Britain. The remaining Hurricane squadrons withdrew to southern England, leaving the British Expeditionary Force without air cover. The evacuation from Dunkirk between May 26th and June 4th saw Hurricanes operating at maximum intensity. 16 squadrons flew continuous patrols over the beaches, engaging every German formation that approached. The Luftwaffe, expecting easy targets, discovered that the RAF was far from beaten. Hauptmann Rolf Pingel of Jagdgeschwader 26, a veteran with 12 victories, engaged Hurricanes of 56 Squadron over Dunkirk on May 28th. His after-action report revealed growing German respect. The British fighters are technically inferior but fought with remarkable determination. They refuse to break formation even when attacked from advantage. Their discipline is excellent. I achieved hits on one Hurricane from dead astern, range 100 metres, and observed no effect. The aircraft remained in formation and continued fighting. This is not what we were told to expect. Over the 9 days of Dunkirk, Hurricanes claimed 258 German aircraft destroyed for the loss of 36 fighters. More importantly, they prevented the Luftwaffe from disrupting the evacuation. Over 330,000 British and French troops escaped because German bombers couldn't penetrate the Hurricane screen. The battle also revealed the Hurricane's extraordinary damage tolerance. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson of 249 Squadron returned to Manston on June 1st, with his aircraft so damaged that ground crew initially recommended scrapping it. 4 20mm cannon shells had hit the fuselage, tearing massive holes in the fabric covering. Over 60 machine gun rounds had struck the wings and tail. The port aileron was hanging by cables. Coolant streamed from 2 hits in the radiator housing. Yet the Merlin engine ran smoothly. The controls still responded. Nicholson had shot down 2 Messerschmitt 110s before limping home. The fabric construction that German pilots mocked had absorbed punishment that would have destroyed a stressed skin aircraft. Cannon shells passed through fabric without exploding, creating manageable holes rather than catastrophic structural failures. The tubular frame distributed loads, preventing local damage from propagating. Repairs that would take days on a Spitfire could be completed overnight on a Hurricane by replacing fabric panels and hammering dented tubes straight. July 1940 brought a brief respite as the Luftwaffe regrouped and prepared for Unternehmen Seelöwe, Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. The plan required air superiority. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring assured Hitler that the Luftwaffe would destroy the RAF in 4 days, 2 weeks at most. The force assembling in France and the Low Countries was formidable. Luftflotten 2, 3 and 5 collectively deployed 2,800 aircraft, including 1,100 fighters, 300 bombers, and 400 dive bombers. Against this armada, Fighter Command could field 640 fighters, of which 420 were Hurricanes. The British fighters would be supported by radar, the chain home stations providing early warning, and by ground controllers who could vector fighters to intercept incoming raids. But the aircraft themselves would have to win the battle, and the aircraft the RAF had the most of, the fighter that would bear the heaviest burden, was the one the Germans had dismissed as obsolete. Reichsmarschall Göring's intelligence staff had prepared detailed assessments of British fighters for his commanders. The briefing document, captured after the war, revealed dangerous German misconceptions. The Hawker Hurricane is a transitional aircraft representing British attempts to modernise from biplane fighters. Its performance is inadequate for modern combat. Maximum speed is insufficient to intercept our bomber formations. Climb rate is poor. Armament of rifle-caliber machine guns cannot seriously damage our aircraft, which feature armour protection and self-sealing fuel tanks. Our pilots should experience little difficulty in destroying this obsolete fighter. Our Messerschmitt 109E is superior in every performance category. Based on this assessment, German fighter pilots approached the coming battle with supreme confidence. They had destroyed the French Armée de l'Air, they had brushed aside the Poles and Czechs. The RAF, they believed, would last perhaps a week before capitulating. The battle officially began on July 10, 1940, though historians differ on exact dates. What's certain is that by mid-July, large German formations were probing British defences, testing radar coverage, and measuring RAF response times. These early raids revealed that German intelligence had been catastrophically wrong about almost everything. On July 19th, 9 Messerschmitt Bf-110 Zerstörers, heavily armed twin-engine fighters, escorted by Bf-109s, attempted to attack a convoy off Folkestone. 6 Hurricanes of 111 Squadron intercepted at 15,000 feet. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. All 9 Bf-110s were destroyed. 2 Hurricanes were damaged, none lost. Flight Lieutenant Stanley Connors described the action. The 110s attempted to form their defensive circle, each aircraft protecting the tail of the one ahead. We simply flew through it. The 8-gun armament cut them to pieces. I fired at one from perhaps 250 yards, dead astern. The entire tail section detached. The aircraft snap-rolled and went straight down. The German tactics, successful against less heavily armed opponents, was suicide against the Hurricane's firepower. Attacking a Hurricane head-on, a tactic that worked against fighters with 2 rifle-caliber guns, became instant death when facing 8 guns. German pilots quickly learned to avoid head-on attacks entirely. Oberleutnant Julius Neumann of Jagdgeschwader 27 wrote, after an engagement on July 24th, approached a Hurricane from ahead and slightly above, expecting easy victory. He turned directly toward me. I saw the gun flashes from his wings and decided discretion was preferable. I broke left and climbed. Later learned 2 of my comrades attempted head-on attacks that same day. Both were shot down. The Hurricane's rudder and elevator control surfaces were blown completely off one aircraft. This is not rifle-caliber armament. August brought the main assault. Adlertag, Eagle Day, was scheduled for August 13th, though bad weather caused confusion and piecemeal attacks. The real intensity began on August 15th, the day the Luftwaffe launched its maximum effort with raids from Norway, Denmark, France and the Low Countries. It was the largest air battle in history to that date, and it would demonstrate conclusively which fighter had been underestimated. Luftflotte 5, based in Norway, launched a raid by 65 Heinkel Ho-111 bombers, escorted by 34 Messerschmitt 110s, expecting to find northern England undefended. RAF Fighter Command detected them while still over the North Sea and scrambled 72 fighters, most of them Hurricanes from 13 Group. What followed was a massacre. The Hurricanes attacked in squadron strength, 3 or 4 aircraft concentrating fire on individual bombers. At 1400 hours, 605 Squadron engaged the Heinkels over Tyneside. Squadron Leader Archie McKellar led his section into the bomber formation from slightly above, closing to 200 yards before opening fire. His combat report was clinical. Selected the lead Heinkel and fired a 3-second burst, concentrating on the cockpit and port engine. Aircraft immediately caught fire and fell away. Selected second Heinkel, same method. Port wing separated at route. Third Heinkel, engine fire, fell out of formation. All 3 confirmed destroyed. Expenditure, approximately 600 rounds. The Messerschmitt 110 escorts, designed for long-range bomber escort, discovered they couldn't protect themselves, much less their charges. Heavier and less manoeuvrable than single-engine fighters, they were easy targets for the Hurricanes. The raid was a catastrophe. For Luftflotte 5, they lost 19 aircraft, most of them bombers, and achieved nothing. The Hurricanes lost 1 aircraft. The pilot survived. Luftflotte 5 never again launched a daylight raid on Britain. In the south, the fighting was continuous and brutal. German formations of 50 to 100 aircraft crossed the channel every few hours, targeting airfields, radar stations and ports. Hurricane squadrons scrambled 4, 5, sometimes 6 times per day. Pilots flew until exhaustion made them dangerous to themselves, then flew again. The German bomber crews discovered that their Heinkel 111s, Dornier 17s and Junkers 88s, which had seemed invulnerable over Poland and France, were flying coffins over Britain. The Hurricane's 8-gun battery could destroy a bomber with a single well-aimed burst. Unteroffizier Hans Schmidt, a Heinkel 111 gunner who was shot down and captured on August 16th, described his experience during interrogation. We were in formation at 15,000 feet approaching Portsmouth when the British fighters attacked. I saw 4 of them. Hurricanes, I think, diving from above. They came very fast. One selected our aircraft. I fired at him from 500 meters. I know I hit him. I saw strikes on the wing. He didn't slow down. He opened fire at perhaps 150 meters. The noise was terrible, like someone ripping metal with their hands. Our port engine exploded immediately, fire everywhere. The pilot gave the order to bail out. From 15,000 feet to capture was perhaps 5 minutes. This is what our gunners face on every mission. The Hurricane shrugs off our defensive fire and destroys us. The combat reports from August 15th alone show 182 German aircraft destroyed or damaged. Hurricanes accounted for 133 of those claims. Fighter Command lost 34 aircraft with 15 pilots killed. The exchange rate was unsustainable for the Luftwaffe. But August 15th was just one day. The battle would continue for another 6 weeks of unrelenting intensity. The key to understanding the Hurricane's success lies in recognizing that it was fighting its designed battle, while the Messerschmitt 109 was not. The 109 had been designed as an air superiority fighter, intended to destroy enemy fighters and establish control of the airspace. The Hurricane had been designed as a bomber-destroyer, optimized for shooting down large aircraft quickly and efficiently. Over Britain in 1940, most combat wasn't fighter versus fighter. It was fighters trying to protect bombers versus fighters trying to destroy bombers. In that battle, the Hurricane's characteristics were nearly perfect. When Hurricanes engaged bombers, the results were predictable. The steady gun platform and concentrated firepower destroyed aircraft reliably. When Hurricanes engaged Messerschmitt 109s, they survived through toughness and kept fighting. When 109s tried to protect their bombers from Hurricanes, they discovered they couldn't. The Hurricane pilots, accepting they couldn't outrun or outclimb the 109s, developed tactics that negated German advantages. Squadron Leader Douglas Bader of 242 Squadron pioneered the big wing concept, gathering 3 or 4 squadrons into a formation of 40 to 60 aircraft before engaging. The massive formations couldn't be bounced by small numbers of 109s. When German fighters dove to attack, they found themselves outnumbered and fighting at British advantage altitudes. Flight Lieutenant Eric Ball of 85 Squadron explained the tactical evolution in a letter written in September 1940. "We don't try to dogfight 109s anymore unless we have overwhelming advantage. Our job is to destroy bombers. The Spitfire squadrons engage the escorts while we go for the bombers. If 109s attack us, we turn into them. They can't stay at combat power for more than minutes before their fuel situation becomes critical. We're fighting over our own territory. We can fight for 30 minutes, land, refuel, rearm, and be back in the air in an hour. They have perhaps 15 minutes over Britain before they must turn for home. Time is our weapon as much as our guns." The fuel situation was critical for German success and became their ultimate limitation. A Messerschmitt 109E carried 88 gallons internally, giving roughly 90 minutes total flight time. From bases in Pas-de-Calais to London and return was 280 miles, consuming about 60 gallons. That left fuel for perhaps 20 minutes of combat at full power. After that, German pilots had a stark choice: break off and run for France, or continue fighting and ditch in the Channel. Hurricanes operating from bases like Biggin Hill, Kenley or Tangmere had unlimited combat time by comparison. They fought until ammunition exhausted or until damage forced landing, but never because of fuel. This strategic asymmetry meant that any extended engagement favoured the British. German pilots had to win quickly or disengage. Hurricane pilots could keep fighting until they won. The damage tolerance that German pilots mocked became legendary among Hurricane squadrons. On August 16th, Pilot Officer William Rhodes Morehouse of 601 Squadron returned to Tangmere with his Hurricane so damaged that the ground crew chief initially refused to believe it had flown home. The port wing had 2 shell holes large enough to crawl through. The fabric on the fuselage was shredded from nose to tail. The canopy was shattered. Oil covered the windscreen. Control cables were severed. Rhodes Morehouse had flown the last 10 minutes using trim tabs alone. The Merlin engine had been hit twice but continued running. Rhodes Morehouse had shot down 2 Messerschmitt 110s before being hit. The chief armourer counted 87 machine gun strikes and 7 cannon shell impacts. Any 3 of those hits would have destroyed a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The Hurricane absorbed all 94 and flew. Repairs took 4 days. The aircraft returned to service and flew another 120 operational sorties before being retired in 1941. The German bomber crews developed healthy respect bordering on fear for the Hurricane. Obergefreiter Wilhelm Raab, a Dornier 17 pilot, described his 5th mission over England in his diary. August 20th, 1940. Morning mission to Manston Aerodrome. Heavy fighter opposition, Hurricanes everywhere. They don't attack one at a time like the Spitfires. They come in sections of 4, all firing simultaneously. Our formation lost 6 aircraft in perhaps 2 minutes. I saw one Dornier simply explode. One moment it was flying, next moment debris and smoke. The hurricane that killed it fired maybe 2 seconds. That's all it took. 2 seconds from life to death. Our gunners hit them repeatedly. They don't seem to notice. One hurricane I personally watched take hits from 3 different guns. It kept coming. It destroyed the aircraft next to us, then flew away trailing smoke but under control. How do you fight something you can't stop? By late August, the Luftwaffe changed tactics. Goering ordered his fighters to stay close to the bombers, providing direct escort rather than flying freelance. This decision, intended to reduce bomber losses, actually made the German fighters less effective. Tied to the slow-moving bomber formations, Messerschmitt 109s lost their speed and altitude advantages. They became targets themselves. On August 24th, 264 Squadron, equipped with bolt-and-pull Defiance, turret fighters that were otherwise useless in the battle, worked in cooperation with 111 Squadron's Hurricanes to devastating effect. The Defiance climbed to 20,000 feet and circled, highly visible and apparently vulnerable. German fighters dove to attack what looked like easy targets. The Hurricanes, waiting below the bomber formation, climbed into the now unprotected bombers and destroyed 7 of them, before the German fighters realized the trap and raced back. The Defiance, with rear-firing turrets, shot down 2 Messerschmitts in the initial bounce. The tactics emphasized the Hurricane's role. It wasn't there to defeat German fighters in classical combat. It was there to destroy bombers, and it excelled at that mission. By month's end, August 1940 showed 175 German aircraft destroyed or damaged. Hurricanes had claimed approximately 715 of those. The Luftwaffe had lost 171 bombers, 148 Messerschmitt 109s, and 58 Messerschmitt 110s confirmed destroyed with aircrews killed or captured. Fighter Command had lost 219 aircraft with 106 pilots killed. The mathematics were brutal but favourable. Britain could replace pilots and aircraft faster than Germany, especially since British factories produced 500 fighters per month, while German production was around 300. September brought the crisis. The Luftwaffe switched to bombing London, hoping to draw out the RAF for a final decisive battle. On September 15th, the battle reached its climax. 2 massive raids, each consisting of multiple waves totaling over 200 aircraft, attacked London in daylight. Every available fighter from 11 Group and 12 Groups scrambled to meet them. 23 Hurricane squadrons and 9 Spitfire squadrons filled the sky over southern England. Flight Lieutenant Brian Lane of 19 Squadron, flying a Spitfire, described watching the Hurricanes go to work. We engaged the fighter escort at 25,000 feet, keeping the 109s busy while 12 Groups Hurricanes hit the bombers. From above, it looked like wolves attacking a flock of sheep. The Hurricanes would select a bomber, 3 or 4 fighters concentrating on it, and simply tear it apart. I watched one Dornier lose both engines simultaneously, the wings crumple, and the entire aircraft break apart in mid-air. This happened over and over. The bombers tried every defensive measure, tight formation flying, violent evasion, even ramming attempts. Nothing worked. The Hurricanes were relentless. The combat lasted from noon until 1400 hours. When it ended, German units reported 61 aircraft lost, though post-war analysis reduced the actual number to 56 confirmed destroyed. Hurricanes claimed 42 of them, most of them bombers. Fighter Command lost 28 aircraft with 13 pilots killed. More importantly, the German formations had been shattered. Bombs fell randomly across London rather than on strategic targets. Some bombers jettisoned their loads over the channel and fled. Others returned so damaged they crashed on landing. September 15th broke the Luftwaffe's will. 2 days later, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion of Britain was cancelled. The immediate threat had passed, though the bombing would continue through the Blitz. The Battle of Britain officially ended on October 31st, 1940. Final statistics showed German losses of 1,733 aircraft destroyed. Hurricanes had accounted for 1,020 confirmed destroyed, more than all other British defences combined, including Spitfires, anti-aircraft guns and accidents. Fighter Command lost 544 aircraft with 339 pilots killed. The exchange rate of nearly 3-to-1 was decisive, but numbers alone don't capture the Hurricane's contribution. It had been available in large numbers when needed most. It had been easy to produce, allowing rapid replacement of losses. It had been easy to repair, keeping squadron strength high despite damage. It had been easy to fly, allowing novice pilots to become effective quickly. Most importantly, it had been brutally effective against the target that mattered, German bombers. After the battle, captured German documents revealed the changing attitude toward the Hurricane. A Luftwaffe intelligence summary from October 1940, captured in 1945, admitted, "Previous assessments of the Hawker Hurricane were optimistic to the point of fantasy. The aircraft, while technically inferior to our Bf-109 in performance, proved superior in the role of bomber-destroyer. Its armament is devastating. Its ruggedness allows it to absorb damage that would destroy other fighters. Most critically, it is available in numbers that suggest British productive capacity was severely underestimated. The combination of radar direction, ground control, and the Hurricane's characteristics created a defensive system we could not overcome." Reichsmarschall Göring, desperate to explain the failure to Hitler, blamed his fighter pilots. In a meeting on September 17, 1940, recorded by several attendees, Göring demanded, "Why are you allowing these antiquated British fighters to destroy our bombers? You have superior aircraft. You outnumber them, yet you fail." Oberst Adolf Galland, commanding Jagdgeschwader 26, responded with the truth. "The Hurricane is not antiquated. It is purpose-built for defensive operations. It doesn't need to be faster than our fighters. It only needs to be fast enough to catch bombers. It doesn't need to outclimb us. It only needs to reach bomber altitude. It doesn't need maneuverability because it doesn't dogfight. It gets to the bombers and destroys them. We shoot them down, and more appear. We damage them severely. They return the next day repaired. We thought they were obsolete museum pieces. We were wrong." This admission, from one of Germany's premier fighter leaders, represented the complete reversal of German assessment. The Flying Haystack had defeated the Luftwaffe. The Hurricane's finest hour came on August 16, 1940, when Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson of 249 Squadron won the only Victoria Cross awarded to Fighter Command during the entire war. Nicholson was leading a section of 3 Hurricanes on patrol over Southampton when they were bounced by Messerschmitt 110s. Cannon shells hit Nicholson's aircraft, wounding him in the leg and setting the cockpit on fire. Fuel from a severed line ignited, covering him in flames. He was about to bail out when he spotted a Messerschmitt 110 ahead. Despite his aircraft being on fire, despite his clothing burning, despite injuries that should have incapacitated him, Nicholson remained in the cockpit. He closed to 150 yards and fired a sustained burst until his ammunition exhausted. The Messerschmitt exploded. Only then did Nicholson bail out, suffering additional injuries when he was shot at while descending in his parachute by overzealous Home Guard. His Hurricane crashed in flames near Millbrook. Nicholson spent months in the hospital recovering from severe burns and wounds. He survived, returned to duty, and later transferred to the Far East, where he was killed in 1945 when his Liberator crashed. The Hurricane's success rested on perfect alignment between design characteristics and mission requirements. Sidney Cam had created a fighter optimized for shooting down bombers over friendly territory. That was exactly what Britain needed in 1940. The fabric covering that looked obsolete was actually advantageous. Cannon shells passed through without detonating, creating holes rather than structural failure. Machine gun bullets did the same. A stressed skin aircraft would have crumpled under the same damage load. The metal tube frame distributed stresses, preventing local damage from propagating. Hit the wing of a Hurricane and you damage the wing. Hit the wing of a Spitfire and you might compromise the entire structure. The thick wing that reduced speed also housed all the guns and ammunition in a concentrated package with short feed paths. This reduced jamming and made combat reloading possible. Hurricane pilots regularly landed, had all 8 guns reloaded in 10 minutes, and were airborne again. Try that with wing-mounted cannon. The steady gun platform meant average pilots could hit targets reliably. The Spitfire was a scalpel requiring surgical precision. The Hurricane was a hammer that anyone could swing effectively. This mattered enormously when training time was measured in weeks and combat life expectancy in days. The wide-track landing gear meant Hurricanes operated from rough fields and damaged runways without incident. After raids damaged Kenley, Biggin Hill and Manston, Hurricanes continued operating while Spitfires were diverted to undamaged fields. The radial-looking Merlin installation, actually an inline engine with roomy cowling, could absorb hits to accessories without stopping. Coolant system damage was survivable for extended periods because the large cowling provided some cooling even with radiator damage. Production numbers tell their own story. Between July and October 1940, British factories delivered 1,600 fighters. Approximately K300 were Hurricanes. The Hawker and Gloucester factories, along with Austin Motors producing Hurricanes under license, turned out roughly 50 aircraft per week. This industrial capacity meant that destroyed Hurricanes were replaced within days. Pilot replacement was the bottleneck, not aircraft availability. The manufacturing process used non-strategic materials and semi-skilled labour, allowing rapid expansion. By contrast, Spitfire production required aluminum alloys, skilled workers and complex jigs. The Hurricane could be built by furniture makers. The Spitfire required aircraft specialists. When Supermarine's factory was bombed in September, Spitfire production dropped dramatically. When Hawker's Kingston facility was hit, production relocated to dispersed sites and continued uninterrupted. The Hurricane's simplicity was a strategic asset. German pilots who survived encounters with Hurricanes developed deep respect for the aircraft and its pilots. Lieutenant Heinz Knoke of Jagdgeschwader 52, who later wrote a memoir of his war service, described a September 1940 engagement. We bounced a formation of 6 Hurricanes over Maidstone. They turned into us immediately, no panic, complete discipline. I selected one and fired from 150 metres. I saw my rounds strike the fuselage and wing. The Hurricane shuddered but stayed in formation. I attacked again, another burst, more hits. Still it flew. Then it turned on me. I broke away, looking back to see it trailing smoke but still in formation with its squadron. This happened repeatedly. You could hit them, see the damage, and they kept fighting. Our intelligence said they were obsolete. Our intelligence was dangerously wrong. These British pilots in their fabric-covered fighters were winning through sheer determination and aircraft that refused to die. The Hurricane also proved adaptable beyond its original design parameters. As the battle evolved, modifications appeared rapidly. The constant speed propeller replaced fixed-pitch units, improving climb rate by 15%. Metal-skinned wings began appearing on production aircraft in September, though fabric wings remained standard through 1941. Armour protection increased from initial 6 mm backplate to 12 mm, then to full wraparound protection for the pilot. Self-sealing fuel tanks, initially absent, became standard by October. Each modification was simple enough to retrofit in squadron workshops. The evolutionary improvements happened faster than German intelligence could track. What amazed German pilots most was the apparent endlessness of Hurricane numbers. They would shoot down 6 in the morning, 8 at midday, and encounter fresh squadrons in the afternoon. Where were they coming from? The answer was British industrial mobilisation. Lord Beaverbrook, appointed Minister of Aircraft Production in May 1940, had reorganised the entire industry around fighter production. Civilian aircraft production stopped. Bomber production slowed. Everything focused on fighters, primarily Hurricanes because they could be built fastest. The shadow factory system, established before the war, meant that automotive plants, furniture factories, and engineering shops across Britain were building Hurricane components. Final assembly happened at multiple sites. If one factory was bombed, others continued. The distributed production system was nearly impossible to disrupt completely. German bombers did hit aircraft factories. On September 26th, the Supermarine works at Woolston was destroyed, killing workers and stopping Spitfire production for weeks. On the same day, a raid hit the Hawker factory at Brooklands. Production stopped for 3 days, then resumed at 80% capacity. Within 2 weeks, full production was restored using dispersed facilities. The Luftwaffe couldn't bomb British production faster than it could recover and expand. By October 1940, monthly Hurricane production exceeded 500 aircraft, more than the entire German fighter output. The mathematical inevitability of British victory became clear. The Hurricane's success also validated a controversial design philosophy. British aviation establishment had long believed that speed was paramount, that the fastest fighter would dominate. The Spitfire embodied this philosophy, a sleek thoroughbred optimised for performance. The Hurricane represented an alternative view, that combat effectiveness depended on multiple factors, including firepower, durability, ease of production, and availability in numbers. Over Britain in 1940, the alternative view proved correct. Speed mattered less than reliability. Elegance mattered less than toughness. Individual aircraft quality mattered less than total force strength. The Hurricane was slower than the Spitfire, but available in greater numbers. It was less elegant, but easier to repair. It was less refined, but more forgiving of pilot error. In a battle of attrition against a technologically superior enemy, these characteristics were decisive. The psychological impact on German aircrew was profound and measurable. Luftwaffe intelligence conducted surveys of returning bomber crews in September 1940, asking them to identify the greatest threats they faced. The Hurricane topped every list. The 80 Thermoplacer flak guns around London were feared, Spitfires were respected, but Hurricanes were the nightmare. Bomber crews described them as unstoppable. You could shoot them, see them burning, and they kept coming. Their guns never seemed to run out of ammunition. They attacked in groups, coordinating their fire. One Hurricane was dangerous. 4 attacking together was certain death. The Dornier 17 units suffered particularly heavy casualties because their defensive armament was inadequate against massed machine gun attack. Heinkel 111 crews had better defensive firepower, but still couldn't stop determined Hurricane attacks. Only the Junkers 88, fastest of German bombers, could sometimes outrun Hurricanes to safety, and even then only by jettisoning bombs and diving for the channel. By October, German bomber formations required fighter escort of at least 1-to-1 ratio, 1 fighter for each bomber. This requirement strained German resources and limited raid sizes. The Messerschmitt 109's short range meant escorts could only cover raids to London and the immediate surrounding area. Targets beyond fighter range became nearly impossible to attack in daylight. The strategic initiative had shifted completely. The Luftwaffe was reacting to RAF dispositions rather than dictating battle terms. German fighters flew when and where the RAF chose to engage. German bombers attacked only targets within fighter range, and even then suffered unsustainable losses. The final daylight raid in force came on September 30th, 1940. A formation of 200 aircraft attacked London in 2 waves. Hurricanes of 229, 238, 242, 249, 303, 310, and 605 squadrons intercepted over Kent. The combat was brief and one-sided. 19 German aircraft were destroyed, 12 by Hurricanes. Fighter Command lost 6 aircraft with 2 pilots killed. After September 30th, German daylight bombing essentially ceased. The Luftwaffe switched to night operations where British defences were less effective. The Battle of Britain was over. The Hurricane had won. Post-battle analysis by the RAF revealed fascinating statistics. Hurricane squadrons flew 54% of total fighter command sorties during the battle. They claimed 59% of total German aircraft destroyed. Their loss rate per sortie was actually lower than Spitfire squadrons, contradicting assumptions that the slower Hurricane would be more vulnerable. The reason was tactical employment. Hurricanes primarily engaged bombers, which were less dangerous opponents than fighters. Spitfires primarily engaged Messerschmitt 109s in fighter versus fighter combat. Bombers shot back but rarely manoeuvred effectively. Fighters required different tactics and involved higher risk. Squadron Leader Tom Neil of 253 Squadron, badly burned when his Hurricane was shot down in August, analysed the tactical division in a post-war interview. The public saw the Spitfire as the glamour fighter, and it deserved that reputation. Spitfires kept the 109s off our backs while we killed bombers, but make no mistake, we won the battle because we destroyed German bombers faster than they could replace them, and faster than they could achieve strategic objectives. The Hurricane was the weapon that accomplished that mission. Without Hurricanes in large numbers, we would have lost regardless of how good the Spitfire was. The Hurricane's combat debut had been inauspicious. It had been mocked for being slow, outdated, and obsolete. German pilots laughed at its appearance and dismissed its capabilities. But by November 1940, those same German pilots who survived refused to fly bomber escort missions. The Hurricanes had broken their confidence. The Hurricane went on to serve throughout the war in roles far beyond its original design. It became a night fighter, responsible for some of the first successful radar-guided interceptions. It became a ground attack aircraft, operating in North Africa with devastating effectiveness against Axis armour. Hurricanes equipped with 40mm cannon under the wings destroyed more German tanks in North Africa than any other weapon system. It became a naval fighter, operating from converted merchant ships as Sea Hurricanes, protecting convoys from long-range German bombers. It served in Burma, Malta, the Soviet Union, and nearly every theatre of the war. Over 14,500 Hurricanes were built, more than any other British aircraft. The final Hurricane rolled off the production line in July 1944, by which time it was genuinely obsolete, outclassed by late-war fighters. But in 1940, when Britain stood alone, when invasion barges gathered across the Channel, when the Luftwaffe came in waves that darkened the sky, the Hurricane was exactly what was needed. Not the best fighter in the world, but the right fighter for the moment. Tough, available, deadly against bombers, and built by the thousands. The transformation of German opinion was complete and permanent. Major Adolf Galland, in his post-war memoirs, dedicated an entire chapter to the Battle of Britain. His assessment of the Hurricane was blunt. We were told the RAF flew obsolete aircraft crewed by amateur pilots. Both assessments were catastrophically wrong. The Hurricane was not obsolete. It was specialised, optimised for defensive operations in ways we didn't understand. Its firepower was greater than anything we faced in Spain or France. Its structural strength allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy our aircraft. Most importantly, there were always more of them. We would destroy a squadron in the morning and face the same squadron, fully re-equipped, that afternoon. The British had built an aircraft that matched their strategic requirement, defence of the homeland, and they produced it in quantities we couldn't match. Our intelligence failed us. Our leadership failed us. But most of all, we failed to understand that technical specifications don't win battles. The right aircraft in the right numbers with the right tactics wins battles. In 1940, the Hurricane was all three. General Lieutenant Werner Kreiper, who served in the Luftwaffe operations staff during the battle, was even more direct in his post-war testimony. The Hurricane defeated us. Not the Spitfire, though it played a role. Not radar, though that helped them. Not British courage, though they had that in abundance. The Hurricane defeated us because it was there in numbers sufficient to destroy our bombers faster than we could achieve our objectives. We needed to establish air superiority in 4 weeks to make invasion possible. We failed because we couldn't stop the Hurricanes from destroying our bomber force. By September, our bomber units were combat ineffective. Crew morale was broken. Aircraft availability was below 50%. Replacement crew quality was declining as experienced airmen died, all because of that fabric-covered fighter we mocked in July. The lessons of the Hurricane's success influenced post-war fighter design in ways still visible today. The importance of ruggedness, of damage tolerance, of ease of maintenance, all became design priorities. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, designed in the 1970s for ground attack, embodies Hurricane philosophy. Not the fastest, not the most sophisticated, but tough, heavily armed, and effective at its mission. The F-16 Fighting Falcon's design emphasis on high sortie rates and rapid turnaround reflects lessons learned from Hurricane operations. Modern air forces understand that availability matters more than peak performance. A fighter that flies 20 hours per week at 80% effectiveness is more valuable than one that flies 5 hours per week at 100% effectiveness. The Hurricane proved this in 1940. For the men who flew Hurricanes in 1940, the aircraft inspired fierce loyalty. Squadron Leader Peter Townsend, who commanded 85 Squadron during the battle, wrote in his memoir, "The Hurricane was a fighter pilot's aircraft. Stable, forgiving, tough as old boots. You could throw it around the sky without worrying about breaking it. The visibility was excellent. The controls were responsive but not twitchy. The gun platform was rock steady. You aimed, you fired, you hit. When you were hit and everyone was hit eventually, the Hurricane brought you home. I was shot down 3 times. The Hurricane saved my life 3 times. I would have flown it against anything, anywhere." Group Captain Douglas Bader, the legless ace who led the big wing formations, was equally emphatic. "People always asked me, Spitfire or Hurricane?" The answer was always Hurricane for one simple reason. When you pressed the trigger, things died. The 8-gun battery was devastating. You aimed at a bomber, fired for 2 seconds, and watched it disintegrate. No other fighter could do that reliably. The Spitfire was a wonderful aircraft, but it was a fighter's fighter. The Hurricane was a bomber's nightmare, and that's what we needed. The ultimate vindication of the Hurricane came not from British sources, but from the target. General Major Joseph Schmid, Chief of Luftwaffe Intelligence during the Battle of Britain, was interrogated extensively after the war about intelligence failures. His assessment, contained in captured documents, was damning to German preconceptions. Our intelligence on the Hurricane was our greatest failure. We assessed it based on technical specifications, speed, climb rate, maneuverability. By those measures, it was inferior to our fighters. What we failed to assess was combat effectiveness in the actual battle being fought. The Hurricane's firepower was unprecedented. 8 machine guns firing simultaneously created a destruction zone that no aircraft could survive. We knew this theoretically, but didn't understand the practical implications. One Hurricane could destroy a bomber in a single attack. A section of 4 Hurricanes could destroy a bomber formation in minutes. We had no defense against this. Our fighter escorts couldn't prevent it. Our bomber defensive armament couldn't stop it. Our tactics couldn't compensate for it. The Hurricane's durability was equally important. We would hit them repeatedly, see them smoking and damaged, and assume they were destroyed. Then the same aircraft would return the next day, repaired and operational. British repair capabilities were extraordinary, but it was the Hurricane's construction that made rapid repair possible. Replace fabric panels, straighten bent tubes, patch bullet holes, and the aircraft was flyworthy again. Our stressed skin aircraft required complete structural replacement for similar damage. Most critically, we underestimated British production capacity. We thought they had perhaps 500 fighters total. They actually produced more than 500 per month. The Hurricane, because it was simple to build, was available in quantities we couldn't match. By September 1940, we were facing 40 Hurricane squadrons. We couldn't destroy them faster than they were replaced. That mathematical reality made our defeat inevitable. The Hurricane's role in saving Britain cannot be overstated. Without it, the RAF would have fought with Spitfires alone, in insufficient numbers. The Spitfire was superior in performance, but available in half the numbers. The mathematics of attrition would have favoured Germany. With Hurricanes providing numerical superiority and bomber destruction capability, the RAF could sustain losses while inflicting unsustainable casualties on the Luftwaffe. The strategic implications rippled through the entire war. Britain's survival meant a base for future operations against occupied Europe. It meant a launching point for the bomber offensive that would devastate German industry. It meant an unsinkable aircraft carrier that would eventually host the forces that invaded Normandy. None of that was possible without winning the Battle of Britain, and winning the Battle of Britain wasn't possible without the Hurricane. The aircraft that German pilots mocked as a flying haystack, that looked like a relic from a previous war that couldn't match the Messerschmitt's performance in any measurable category, had defended Britain alone when it mattered most. Not through elegance or speed or superior technology, but through toughness, firepower, availability, and the courage of the young men who flew it into battle day after day until the Luftwaffe broke. The German laughter that greeted the Hurricane's arrival in combat lasted only until the first bomber formations fell burning from British skies. After that, there was only respect tinged with fear and the bitter knowledge that they had underestimated their enemy in the most fundamental way possible. The Hurricane taught the Luftwaffe a lesson that military forces relearn in every generation. The winner isn't always the side with the best equipment. It's the side with the right equipment in sufficient quantities, employed properly, sustained by industrial capacity, and flown by men who refuse to quit. In the summer of 1940, against a technologically superior enemy, Britain had all those elements, and the Hurricane was the instrument that delivered victory.